This is Tom Morrow on the second half of Living Legacies for best-selling author Oceanside's Victor Villasenor. Victor has had 7 books published. He's written more than 30, and he's always working on another. But just to give you some idea of how gripping his stories can be, he can pull you right into a book within less than 100 words. Just listen to this. On May 20th, 1971, the body of a man was dug up by sheriff's deputies in an orchard near Yuba City, California. He had been brutally murdered. Over the next 2 weeks, 24 more bodies would be discovered within 3 square miles. All had been savagely killed. On May 26, 1971, before the authorities knew the extent of the crimes, Juan Corona, a labor contractor, was arrested. He was subsequently charged with the largest mass murder ever attributed to one man in the history of the United States. How did you get onto this story?
It was an accident. I just sold my first book, Macho, to my publisher in L.A., and then I don't read the paper that much, and he says, "So what do you think of your relative up there in Yuba City?" And I said, what relative? And he said, "You know, he's just been arrested for all these murders." So I said, I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't read the paper for a few days, and it just happened that week he was arrested. Well, when I read the papers and all that, I said the guy must be innocent. You know, another Mexican's being blamed for something. So I immediately became interested, and I got a contract for $7,000 with $500 down. And I got in my van and drove up there and spent 4 years there.
A publishing
Yeah,
contract?
Bantam of Random House in Bantam.
$7,000. You spent 4 years on this project?
Well, it cost me a lot more than that. I had to work in construction to keep myself going. But I only got $500 advance.
Uh-huh. That got you up there.
Yeah, and then I rented a place to put my van, and it was costing me, I think it was costing me $2 a day. And then I was, I was living real cheap. And as I started getting involved with it and interviewing the sheriff and everybody, I'll tell you what happened immediately. It was all these reporters from New York, L.A., everywhere bombarding, and they're asking the sheriff this and this and this and this and that. So I went up to the sheriff. His name was Whitaker. I'll never forget him, a big, handsome young man, about 37. I was, I think, 28 at the time. And I said, my name is Victor Villasenor. I don't know enough to ask you any real questions, so I just want to tell you that I'm going to be hanging out here for a while. And he says, "Shake hands. You're the first intelligent reporter I've met." He said, "Get in the car with me. I'll take you around." And all of a sudden, I got in the car with the sheriff, and he's taking me all around, and I'm learning things that none of the other reporters could get into because I said I don't know enough to ask any intelligent questions.
So you were getting the inside story.
Oh, yeah. And then I got to go in and meet Juan Corona, which I don't even know if it was legal to do that. And I talked to him outside. I sat outside his cell and spoke to him in Spanish. And I started learning all these things. And I learned so much about interviewing people that you don't ask a lot of questions. You kind of just hang out with them, eat an apple, drink a cup of tea, and
let them talk.
And let them talk.
What kind of guy was Juan Corona, or is?
Well, he was a very religious man. Very hardworking, big, strong man, about 220 solid. And he and his brothers came here from Jalisco, from Guadalajara, and they were working hard, and they were working contractors. And I'll tell you, all those people that were killed, there's a big mistake in all the newsprint to this day. He never killed a farm worker. He killed migrant winos. And the papers think that because they were migrants, they were migrant workers. It was not migrant workers, it was winos.
Why did he kill them? Did you ever find out?
Well, if you want to go on the theory that he did do it, he did it because he thought he was cleaning up the world. They were on welfare. He saw a lot of people that were working hard that weren't getting paychecks. But there's a lot of things going on. There was a lot of homosexuality going on with his older brother. There was a lot of violence, a lot of drinking. You'd have to understand the whole thing. Mm-hmm. Like the book Jury I wrote, it's from the juror's point of view. And I never put all the facts and stories I know into it, which are incredible. And the jurors to argue about a murder trial with only knowing what they were presented is an amazing feat. This little book, Jury, that you picked up here, it got reviewed on the front page of the New York Times. It's a fantastic book. And we thought it was going to be made into a movie. The main juror, Phillips, I wish he was President of the United States. He was from West Virginia, a hillbilly that went in the Army, never got beyond an enlisted man. I think he was a major sergeant or something. He brought those people together. Brilliant man, way smarter than our present president.
How much did language play into understanding what was going on with the...
Tremendously. The prosecution could have done a much better job by knowing language. The defense attorney could have done a better job. And by only knowing one language and not... And see, they'd bring experts in that spoke perfect Spanish, and they didn't know what was going on.
They didn't know how to interpret the
They
Spanish.
didn't know how to... We're talking about uneducated people with slang, with different meanings, and they missed the whole point. I would be listening, and it'd be hysterical. I mean, it was awful, the mistakes that were made on both sides.
The reason why I bring that up is because now, somewhere in your career, and I don't know whether it was before or after that, you wrote the screenplay for the Ballad of Gregorio Cortez, which is a famous story that took place in Texas.
Right.
And it was all over the misunderstanding one word in Spanish.
One word.
Tell me about Gregorio Cortez.
Gregorio Cortez is a true story. I love investigating. I love interviewing. And I went down to Texas, a small cow town, Gonzales. And what happened there is that the sheriff came out with an interpreter that didn't know any Spanish but thought he did.
A gringo.
Yeah, a gringo. And he says, did you change a horse? ¿Cambiaste un caballo? And Gregorio Cortez says, no. Fue una yegua. He said, no, it was a mare that I exchanged. And then the interpreter says, he says, no. And then says, he's not going to tell you anything. And he says, well, then tell him he's under arrest. And the interpreter says, you're under arrest. And then he says, you can't arrest a man for nothing. In Spanish, no puedes arrestar un hombre por nada. And he says, he just said no man can arrest him. And a shootout starts.
And that movie was starred Edward James Olmos, and
right.
It was very well received critically.
Well, it won awards in Europe a lot, and that's the movie that got Eddie going.
It got Edward James Olmos going, but you made a fortune, right?
Oh yeah, I made I think $7,000 on the whole thing. I made a minimum Writers Guild, and I worked 2 years on it before Eddie became involved with Moctezuma Esparza.
Well, we talked about your dyslexia in the first half of the show and how it really impeded your education, and you're really basically self-taught. How do you write? How do you write your stories?
Well, I'm not self-taught. I had a writer from La Jolla, an old pulp fiction writer. He was a newspaper writer, and then he wrote a book for $500. He taught me about writing. So what I learned about writing is that the opening paragraph, you got to show people where you are, what you're doing, and why you're there.
The who, what, why, where, and when.
Is it what?
Who, what, why, where, and when.
Those, yeah.
The 5 W's.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's what you did in that paragraph that I just read.
Oh, I didn't realize
perfect
that.
Newspaper lead.
Well, you're a newspaper man, so you know.
But I mean, it's perfect.
Yeah. Well, what I want to do is I just want to take the reader from over there, put them here so they know what's going on, and they have a hook why they want to read it, and then take off.
Now, you do all your writing at this table.
Yeah, longhand with this twisted clipboard that's tied together with rawhide. I've been using the same clipboard. I've chewed it, throwing it down. I've gotten mad at my writing.
How many books you written on that clipboard?
Well, about maybe 50 books and maybe 130 short stories. And
no, you don't type.
No, I don't type.
And you have somebody translate your writing into typing?
I have somebody type every day, and then I pick it up at about 2, 3, 4 in the morning.
Which was how many books did Reign of Gold sell? That was probably your best-selling book, wasn't it?
Reign of Gold has sold to date about 300,000, and that's in hardback and quality paper. It hasn't gone to paperback.
Well, I know that any hardback that sells more than 10,000 is considered best-selling, so 300,000 is quite a feat.
Oh, Reign of Gold is an outstanding book. I mean, the year it came out.
Even though you do say so yourself, right?
Oh yeah, and you know the reason I can talk about my writing this way is I didn't write it. See, Reign of Gold right here. Here's an old copy of Reign of Gold. It took me 16 years to write this book. And
well, you said you wrote about 1,400 pages?
1,400 pages at first, and then I dropped the first third and the last third, and this became the middle third. And see, my parents, I'd read it to them, and they'd say, no, mijo, perdiste, no entendiste nada. You missed the whole point. You didn't understand anything. And I'd rewrite it, and then my father said, no. My mother didn't believe in God. My mother lived with God. God and the Virgin Mary are her best friend.
Uh-huh.
And he'd say she'd go to church, and the Blessed Mother likes dirty jokes, my mother always said, so the Virgin Mary would come out of the statue. When she told her a dirty joke, she'd start laughing so hard, she'd come out of the statue, then she'd tell her dirty jokes from heaven. And I'd say, Papa, I'm going to be laughed at if I write that. And he says, so what? Wasn't Christ laughed at, this and this and that, and wasn't he crucified? I said, oh boy. So what I learned, like in interviewing, let people talk. Uh-huh. In writing, let the people lead me how to write. Mm-hmm. So it isn't that this is a great book. Every one of my books, this is a great book. This got reviewed on the front page of the New York Times. They're all really good books. And I need to have people understand, I can't take the credit. It's that I just keep rewriting and keep working and rewriting. I'll work on one paragraph for 3 months. I'll rewrite it 50, 60 times till I get the feel of it.
How do the editors at the publishing house handle your work? Do they have to do much touch-up, or do they pretty much leave you alone?
It's up and down, but when they've tried to do a lot, I buy the book back and dump them. I mean, I have books like, I was paid a lot of money for one book downstairs called Cadillac Joe, and when they started monkeying with it, I said, I'm taking it back.
What do they try to do?
Well, that story starts out about an Indian with a cup of coffee. He's an alcoholic, and he's shaking, and it's about a bear hunt. It's a very violent, wonderful book that happens in Northern California. And they didn't believe any of the books, so they're trying to change it and tone it down.
Make it fiction?
Well, they just were toning it down.
They didn't think anything like that could really happen?
I mean, like dogs on a bear hunt. I've been on lots of bear hunts. They go crazy. They go smash. They slap their tails so hard against a tree till they break their tail or it's bloody. And the men on a hunt, they get so crazy that the same thing they do in combat. That's why war still exists, because of the high it is. War doesn't settle problems. War is a sickness of our people that we need. And I was writing about war here at home, about what happened to these guys that came back from Vietnam. Mm-hmm. It's my writing's very powerful and it's very truthful.
How are you perceived? You're writing a lot of history for the Mexican American community, and I am assuming that you're trying to bridge for the Anglo community so they can have a better understanding of what the Chicano or Mexican American went through coming to this country as immigrants.
That's partly what I do. But what I'm doing on a much larger scale is this. European mentality is boxed in with concepts that there are only five senses. Mm-hmm. That there's such a thing as a noun. Mm-hmm. That time is linear, and there's beginnings and ends. Mm-hmm. And the culture I come from, there are only verbs. Creation's still happening. There are 13 senses. Violence and sex is something that's just part of our species that people take advantage of and create wars. So I'm writing about opening up the floodgates of this emotional planet mm-hmm. so that people can stop hiding everything in the closet. And once that happens, we're better off. We're wonderful people.
Well, before we lose everybody, give me some examples of some of the senses that we might not be aware of, that you write about, and this is in your latest book, isn't it?
13 senses.
Yeah, explain a little bit about what you're talking about.
All right, this is what I talk about. We have 3 human computers, not one. The head right here is one computer, and we have sight, smell, taste, hearing. Well, there's another computer going on that's this big. It's the heart computer, and it's accessed with feelings. Mm-hmm. And then the 6th sense is balance. Mm-hmm. And once you have your feelings in balance, then you can trust those feelings, and guess what happens? Intuition pops in. And then women are quicker and smarter than men. Mm-hmm. And once you have your heart computer going and you trust your intuition, you're not afraid of your feelings. You're not afraid of your sexuality and your emotions, feelings. Then the 8th sense is music, and that accesses the soul. Mm-hmm. God created the universe. Una means unity, verse means music. And music is vibration. So everything is vibrating. They do that in music from India. Everything is alive. Mm-hmm. And then the 9th sense is being psychic. The 10th is a sense of time. The 11th is a sense of space. The 12th is a sense of memory, what Carl Jung writes about the subconscious, the conscious memory of all of us, mm-hmm. the collective consciousness. And then the 13th sense is a sense of being. Human being mm-hmm. is a verb. Supreme being, God, is a verb. And it opens up the whole world, that this is one huge symphony. We're all interconnected.
You said something to me the other day that I found extremely interesting, in that we are sort of prejudiced in that we think that the Bible is the only way, the only book, and you had a nice explanation.
I said this, and I had this vision. When I became a writer, it happened in Wyoming. I was chasing some antelope with a handgun. I was crazy. I had all this hate and revenge I wanted. And I suddenly realized, when I found these seashells and some Indian pottery there, that there are tribes all over the world that have never been written about. And the Jews, the power of the Jews is the Bible. And that connects this tribe to creation and to God. And now everybody jumps behind the Bible and wants to be part of that. And this gives the Jews the power to go all over, and if they're persecuted and beaten up, they still rise up. So then I realized, my parents have a Bible. How they grew up in La Barranca de Cobre. How they grew up, the Yaqui Indians have their own Bible. The Tarahumaras have their own Bible. So then I realized there are Bibles all over the world. In other words, there are stories about each tribe. Mm-hmm. And only when we start accepting all these stories are we going to start having respect and some piece of harmony on earth.
And no one of them is right or wrong.
The word "the" and "only" are destructive. And "the" only exists in European-based languages. It does not exist in Russian, Asian languages, anywhere, or in native languages. The word "the" is a destructive word. There is no "the truth," "the only way."
You are doing quite a bit of lecturing to young people these days. How do you find our young people?
Wonderful. People complain about youth, and I find such hard-working, good kids everywhere I go. And
from all ethnic groups?
All groups. I talk in La Jolla School. I talk in India, where it's all Latinos. I talk in L.A., where it's almost all black. And they're all these hungry kids, but we only hear about the gangs and the fights and the drugs. We don't hear about 90% of the wonderful, hardworking kids. And when I tell them that we're going into world peace and we're getting out of the dark ages of languaging and finger pointing at one another, they start clapping and clapping. And see, the education I got was very small and full of prejudice. There's a whole other education waiting for us.
Well, your parents were not really crazy about you becoming a writer.
My father was a businessman. He owned liquor stores. And my mother, was a businesswoman. And when I told them I was going to become a writer, they went crazy.
And they remembered those days where you had a tough time in school.
And then on top of that, they knew I flunked the third grade twice, but my father gave avocados to the teacher. That's why I passed the second time. And so my parents thought I had no chance of becoming a writer, and they were really scared. They sent me to a psychiatrist to find out if I was crazy. And finally, after 10 years, when I sold my first book, which is Macho here.
That was your first book?
This is my first book.
And it took you 10 years to hit?
10 years. After 265 rejections, I sold this one for... My father said, "What do you say?" I said, "What do you think, Pop? I'm finally published by a major publisher in New York." He said, "What did they pay you?" I said, $4,000. He said, "How long did it take you?" I said, 5 years. He said, "Really good, mijo, really
good." He'd make that in a month at the liquor store, huh?
In a week. And but before my father died, he read Rain of Gold. And just the night he died, he told me this. Right over here in the other house there across the grass. He said to me, "Mijo, if you had made $100 million, I wouldn't be as proud of you." He said, "You wrote about my mother, about our people, with such dignity and strength that when I die right now, I know that our family is going to be able to read about themselves and feel good for generations."
Of all your books that you've written, which do you want people to really, if they can only read one of your books, which one would it be?
I'd have to say it'd be both of them, Rain of Gold and 13 Senses. Because Rain of Gold you don't understand Rain of Gold until you read 13 Senses. So if you had to read one, I'd say 13 Senses. Because it forces you it opens up the doors.
Mm. Well, Victor, we really appreciate you giving us this wonderful opportunity to come into your home. You've shared so much with us of your heritage and how you work, and I hope that this story has inspired even if it's just one person out there to become a writer, if they have this within them, because here's a man who has overcome great hardship in learning disabilities and has become one of the nation's great writers. And Victor Villasenor, we thank you very much.
Gracias. Thank you.
I'm Tom Morrow, and we'll look for you next time here on Living Legacies. This program is made possible through the generous underwriting grants of Hatter Williams and Pretty Insurance Services of Oceanside, providing North County with complete insurance needs for more than half a century. The TriQuest Corporation, providing quality office and manufacturing space in Oceanside. And the North County Times, serving all of North County with complete local daily news coverage and internet services.